welcome to another episode of Piano TV, the echoey empty apartment edition. So this is going to be a very minimal stripped down video because I don't have a lot of tools or equipment. I'm also going to be trying to talk quietly, which for me as a part Ukrainian, it's a very big challenge to do. So I'm at basically a whisper volume. We've got an empty echoey room, and I wanted to talk to you all today about how to figure out what level of piano you're at. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. This is the entire basis of my course, Design Your Own Piano Path, which is where I essentially outline how you can design your own curriculum. It's pretty much in the name. And when you design your own curriculum, you're thinking about, okay, well, what grade am I at? I kind of have to orient myself to a level. And then if I'm at that grade, what are the things that I should be learning at this level so that I can trust that I'm adequately progressing in my piano studies? So I wanted to talk about that in the context also of my complete piano path classes, which open for registration every August, but they're basically classes that run through the fall, winter, and then they finish up in the spring. And a lot of people who are thinking about joining these classes write to me and ask how to decide what level they're at. Especially now, as of this filming, I have 8 different levels. But technically 7. So I've got the beginner levels, A and B, and then I've got grades 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5. The 8th one is an accelerated hybrid of the A and the B class put together. So for those of you who have had prior experience with playing piano, or maybe you played when you were a kid or something like that, it's more of a refresher. But anyway, it's a lot of different classes. So it gets really confusing to decide maybe which one would be the most appropriate. So I wanted to chat about that a little bit today. And I want to make this video relevant to you even if you're not participating in my classes. So I will talk about things in the context of if you're interested in signing up for my classes, but I also want to be mindful of the fact that a lot of people won't, but I still want to make a relevant video for you as well. Holy heck, it is hot in here. So the first point is to think about how long you've been playing. And I like to think about this, how long have you steadily been playing? I make that distinction because some people will have played for maybe 10 years, but it's in a really patchy off and on kind of way where they'll like play for a year a little bit and then not play for 2 years. So someone who's having that sort of patchy relationship with piano is going to be in a different place than someone who's been practicing for 10 years regularly. So amount of time is a really important thing, because if you spent 10 years learning piano off and on, you're probably still ahead of the complete beginner stage, right? So I think the most useful thing is to think about, okay, how long have I been playing seriously? And if it's patchy, try to think of it in terms of how many hours, if I had to guess. And this is a little bit hard to do. I think most of us aren't keeping track of how many hours we're playing piano. But you can spend 10 minutes going over your history and try to just make a guess. So for example, let's say you've been playing for 10 years, but it's been patchy. Maybe one year you were pretty serious, you were doing like an hour a day for a lot of days of the week. So maybe that year you did about 200 hours, but then you didn't really do anything for a couple more years. And then it was sort of like half an hour here and there, and you can kind of tally it up how much time you spent practicing as best you can. Maybe you'll find that over the last 10 years, you've played about 500 hours. Just on a strictly numerical level then, you would probably be past the A and B beginner stages. So that everyone kind of moves at a little bit of a different pace, but that would probably put you somewhere in the window between grade 1 and 2, just based on numerical values alone. There could be some other factors that would change the implication here. So let's say you've never spent any time sight reading. You just learned everything by ear for the last 10 years. Then you might want to step back to like the accelerated level or grade 1, so you can learn some basics about sight reading and develop those skills up to the level of your playing ability. So if your sight reading is really poor, or if it's much below your playing level, I would favor the level that matches your sight reading level. So if you can play really complex stuff, like a grade 7 level, you're really good, but your reading is extremely elementary, I would not go and take grade 7 lessons. I would go and take maybe an earlier level, because even if the pieces are easy to get in your fingers, they're cognitively complex as you're learning how to read I hope there's not going to be too much background noise. It's just motorcycles. I sound like blazing by in the background. We spend a lot of time sight reading in my classes, and if you're interested in following any type of graded system like the RCM or the ABRSM, which qualifies different levels of piano by grade, then even if you don't do those exams, if you're kind of into the idea of progressing levels on your journey, even if you're self-studying, you're going to want to favor sight reading skills. It's not that the ear isn't important. The ear is super important. Learning how to play by ear is something we also talk about, but your ability to sight read is definitely going to be a limiting factor in your ability to learn harder pieces. So that's why I think it's really important to go to the level of your sight reading a little more so than go to the level of your playing. And that's difficult for a lot of adults to do, because it's like, this little one-page baby song, I could learn this in a day. But then actually it takes it takes a while because your reading is really behind. So I know there's a lot of ear players out there. I wanted to just heavily asterisk that point. I mean, generally, I think about the beginner stage level A and B as being roughly 100 hours each. I break this down a little bit more in detail in Design Your Own Piano Path, but you can think of like the A level. If you're doing half an hour a day for most days, then you're probably getting somewhere between 100 and 200 hours of practice in that first year. And then we would do the same thing with B level. So this is all pre-grade 1, so that by the time you get to grade 1, you've probably spent somewhere in the ballpark between 200 hours on the lower end and 400 hours on the higher end learning. And then that's going to make sure you have all those skills appropriately built if you've been working on sight reading to begin grade 1. And then generally with each grade, we increase the amount of practice little by little. Grade 1, I think you could still get away with practicing from 30 to 45 minutes a day, about 6 days a week. Once you start getting into level 3 and 4, you're going to want to nudge that closer to an hour a day. And especially once you get to grade 5, an hour a day is probably going to be your average, like your daily minimum, occasionally a little bit more than that, maybe an hour 15 on the max end. And that number is going to stay pretty constant until you get to the higher levels. So a grade 8 student is probably going to be spending on the higher end about an hour and a half of practice a day. And then that number is significantly going to jump once you start getting into the much higher grades. Grade 8 is sort of, you're a very good piano player by the time you're a grade 8 level. You can read a lot of classical music, maybe not the super crazy difficult classical pieces, but you're going to be able to sound great. People who listen to you play are going to be like, wow, you're really good. Grade 8 is where a lot of people stop and call it a day and say, hey, that's good enough for me. If you want to go to grade 9 and 10, the requirements get a lot more dense. That's where you're going to, about 2 hours a day for grade 9, about 3 hours a day for grade 10. If you're in a heavier preparation cycle, it doesn't have to be that way all the time, but the requirements are a lot harder, both for your time spent practicing, but also for the theory requirements. So grade 9 and 10 have to do additional history and harmony studies in order to kind of appropriately master and complete the level. So we've talked about 2 factors so far. We've talked about time spent practicing a piece, and we've also talked about sight reading being an important limiting factor. So another thing that can help you decide what level you're at is to assess the most recent pieces that you've played and think about a few factors with those pieces. So I'm just referencing, I've gotten a lot of emails about this recently, but one person mentioned Minuet in G by Petzold. It's a very popular piece. Da, 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 da. Most of you are familiar with the tune, and I have a tutorial for it on my channel. It's a grade 3 level piece. So let's say that this was one of the recent pieces that you have been learning. How many hours did it take you to learn it? Was it a struggle, or did it come together really quickly? So let's be really specific with this. So let's say it took you somewhere between 6 to 8 hours and to learn quite well. And let's say that it was not a struggle, but it wasn't easy. So it was kind of in the sweet spot. And it took you about a month of practice. So again, 6 to 8 hours total, but that was spread over like, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes a day for 4 weeks or something like that. So you didn't grind it out. You didn't spend like hours on it every day, or you didn't spend like 10 plus hours on it. That to me would suggest that you are at a grade 3 level, because you're playing a grade 3 piece in roughly 6 to 8 hours, which is about how long I would expect anyone at a grade 3 level to get a piece quite well. There is, it might, if it's like drastically lower than that, like if it only takes you 2 to 3 hours to learn an equivalent piece well, then level might actually be a little easy for you. In which case you might want to explore level 4 or level 5. Now, if that penciled piece is a struggle for you and your end result is like not great quality, it's like really choppy and hesitant, and you feel like, oh, when you're playing it, and it took you over 10 hours to learn, then grade 3 is probably much too hard for you, and you probably want to back up to grade 1 or 2. So if you go through this assessment process with, let's say, the last 3 to 5 pieces you've learned, then you can start to see, okay, how long did I spend on this piece? What are like the averages or appropriate averages for learning pieces, and was it a massive struggle, or was it like incredibly easy, a breeze I just flew through? What we're typically looking for, and I'll just break it down a little bit, at an A and B level, we typically go through pieces 1 per week, and we're typically not spending more than 2 hours per piece. So it's going to get a little bit higher once we get to grade 1. So grade 1 and 2, we would probably spend 2 to 4 hours on every piece. Grade 3 to 4, we're probably spending 5 to 8 hours per piece. And again, this is spread out. This isn't all in 1 week. This, once we start getting higher numbers, and it depends how hard the piece is. But if you're doing a grade 3 piece and it takes you 5 hours, that's, I think, happily within the range. And if that 5 hours is spent over 3 weeks, perfect. Grade 5, probably closer to 10 hours. So I like to leave about 6 weeks with about 20 minutes a day for the grade 5 pieces. 10 to 12 hours, that would be pretty high end though. I think 8 to 10 would be pretty normal for a grade 5 piece. And even grade 6 or 7 level piece should fit pretty nicely within that range. So think about that, because as pieces, even as you get better, the pieces are going to get more complex. They're going to get longer, and that's what makes them harder to learn. There's just a lot more detail. So even though you are better, you're probably not going to be able to, if you're a grade 7 student, you're probably not going to be able to learn a grade 7 piece in an hour. Just because that's just not how, usually the higher level you get, the longer it takes to learn pieces, again, even as your skill increases. But it's gonna, let's say you're a grade 7 student and it takes you 10 hours to learn an average grade 7 piece. It's probably only gonna take you like 2 hours to learn a grade 4 level piece. So you really start to notice your improvement as the grades that you've already completed, as the amount of time it would take you to learn those pieces start drastically shrinking. So grade 4 to 7, there's a 3-year difference. So maybe it would take you 10 hours to learn a grade 4 piece when you're in grade 4, but then only 2 hours to learn it when you're in grade 7. You see how that number starts shrinking the higher levels you get? So as you keep climbing the ladder, it's probably going to take you a little longer to learn each piece, and you're going to necessarily learn less pieces at the level, but it's also going to noticeably shrink the amount of time that you would spend playing pieces at a lower level. So if you're at a grade 7 level, you could probably you probably sight read A, B, grade 1 pieces even, and figure them out in 10 minutes or less. Whereas when you were just starting, those pieces might have taken 2 hours to learn. Another way to assess what level you're at is to take a look at method books. Method books are really, really useful for this, because especially in the earlier grades. So if you're in any of the adult method books, whether it's Piano Adventures or Alfred's, a bunch of them are really kind of similarly leveled. And if you're in book 1, I would roughly equate that to CPP-A or a level A. So pre-grade 1. And if you're in book 2 of the adult book, that's going to be roughly equivalent with B. The B level, getting into grade 1 level. So if you've worked through a couple method books and they're pretty breezy, like you finished a second method book, you could probably be pretty confident that you're past the beginner A-B stages and that you're ready maybe for more grade 1 or 2 material. I use Piano Adventures a lot, so I'm the most familiar with them, but I know Alfred's follows a very similar template. Once you get past a couple adult beginner books, you can move into the main series. So for Piano Adventures, I tie in level 2A with grade 1, level 2B with grade 2, and level 3 with grade 3. And the Piano Adventures are going to be a little easier than the regular pieces at those levels, but that's how I tie it in. So if you're playing comfortably from the Piano Adventures level 3 book, then it's probably pretty safe to say that you'd be able to handle grade 2 level material quite well. And if you were to do a grade 3 level class, we would be using that same Piano Adventures book, but it would be, the pieces would be harder than that. So you can kind of adjust accordingly. Another really useful resource for trying to determine your level is the Royal Conservatory of Music, the RCM, their syllabus, and it's freely available online. It's like this big, dense PDF. And what it does is it gives you a list of pieces at every grade level. So grade 1, it's got like 100 or 200 pieces, grade 2, same deal, and so forth. So what you can do is you can try to find any pieces you've learned. Maybe like look at the last year of random pieces. So you could type in Petzold or Minuet in G and see, like do a search function and see if it shows up anywhere in the PDF, and then see, oh, hey, look, that's a grade 3 level piece. I learned a grade 3 level piece. So a lot of pieces that you're learning, especially if you're interested in classical, but the RCM also has a ton of contemporary, so don't write that off either. If you do a search function, since the syllabus is so huge, you're bound to have like a hit or two over the last maybe year of piano pieces that you've been learning. So do a search that way, because you might find like, oh, actually, it seems like the pieces I'm learning are hovering kind of around grade 2 level. Here's a 1, a 3, a 2. So maybe that kind of makes sense, especially if you're considering the context of all the other questions you're asking yourself about determining your level. On the other hand, you might find, and a lot of students are in this position, where if you search the pieces you're working on, it's like grade 8, grade 6, grade 9, and maybe really high level pieces, like maybe you're really into learning Chopin, or you're really into learning Bach, and a lot of the pieces are sitting at these higher levels. You might also assess some of the other components of your practice and realize, I have been spending like 20 hours per piece. I've only learned 3 pieces in the entire year, and I don't feel like I've learned any of these pieces very well. Extremely common for piano players to just shoot for the moon, grind it out for a ton of hours, and then maybe end up with a finished result that they're not super pleased with. If that's the case, let's say your pieces are hovering between grade 5 to 9, and you're not feeling too great about any of them, it might be more that your level, or the music that you'd be comfortable learning in the timeframes we've already specified, would be more like grade 3, grade 4, something like that. A lot of people, and again, I can't overstate this, a lot of people really overshoot what they're capable of. And you get people on the other extreme too, who undershoot, who have been sitting at a beginner level for a long time and they're afraid of pushing themselves a little bit further. You know who you are. I think there's no issue. I get emails like this a lot where someone's like, yeah, I've just been like sitting with beginner's music for the last 5 years and I don't know what to do. And I also get people who are like, man, I just spent a year working on one piece and I didn't get very far with it. So if that's you, you could probably be self-aware enough to know it's you. Also, feel free to let me know in the comments where you happen to sit. It's hard to find that nice, happy medium. But just notice if you're on one extreme or the other. If you have the tendency to shoot low and keep yourself kind of limited at a lower level, maybe nudge yourself forward. So maybe you've been doing beginner's level method book stuff for like 5 years and you've clocked over 500 hours doing it roughly. Maybe challenge yourself with grade 1 or grade 2 and step a little out of your comfort zone. On the other end, if you've been doing a lot of grade 8 music and it's been a real struggle, come down, take that balloon down a little bit, come visit us at level 4 and level 5. And then finally, once you have a decent sense of where you're at, what you can do to really test that idea is to take a look at the syllabus, the Royal Conservatory of Music syllabus. Again, it's free. Let's say you've decided, okay, I think I'm probably sitting around grade 4 level. You can look at the song list for the grade 4 level and maybe pick a couple. The older pieces, like the Baroque and Classical, are typically free without copyright online. Other ones you might have to pay for a book, but it does tell you what books they're from. But I would recommend sticking with the free options because you can print off a sheet or two and try it out. So maybe you think you're at a grade 4 level, you can print off a grade 4 level piece and try learning it. Can you learn it in a month or less? Can you learn it in under 7 hours of practice? If so, that's probably gonna be an appropriate level for you. On each of my complete piano path pages, of which, like I said, there were 8 because we've got level A, B, accelerated, that's 3, and then we've got grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got a page for each of them. And if you go to pianotv.net/PTV school, I'll link it below, you'll have a list of all the different classes that I teach. So you can take a look on each class page. So let's say you think you're a grade 4 student, maybe. I will have a downloadable file of one of the grade 4 pieces I print. So if you don't want to go searching for sheet music on your own, just go to one of my pages, and I provide a copyright-free sheet that I've entered in on MuseScore myself and created my own PDF for, and use that as your level test. Again, I have them available for all the different grades as a way for people to kind of check in and see how it feels. With everything else we've talked about in this video, you should be able to get a pretty clear sense of where you're sitting if you take a look at those sheets, if you assess how long you've been practicing, and all the other steps that we've talked about. And of course, one thing that I always do whenever courses are open for a period of usually a couple weeks in August is I talk with people. I email back and forth with them. So it's pretty common for people to email me and say, I think I'm at this level, but what do you think? And I'm happy to engage in that sort of back and forth with you if it'll help you kind of figure out where you're at. And if you want to join one of our group classes, then help you decide which one to do. And if you are joining or thinking about joining one of our group classes, it is extremely easy to switch you over to a different class. So if you join the grade 3 class but realize after a couple weeks that it's too hard, I can just switch you over to grade 2 class. It's not a big deal. Usually within a month, everyone gets where they're going, and we kind of wiggle around a little bit until we've got our set sort of class structure. But there are always people who realize for one reason or another that they signed up for the wrong one and they want to jump over. Super easy, not a problem to do. So I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say. So like I said, check out the links below because you can get more information on some of the ideas that I've been sharing with you there. And stay tuned for news about the classes that I open in every August. As of this video's filming, which is in 2025, next week I will be making a video to let you know that registration is open. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you were able to get through the weird background, the echoey sound, and the fact that I'm sitting on the floor with sweat pouring down my forehead. Thank you so much. Take care, guys.